It'll be easy.
Okay, so we're streaming and recording, so we can get started when we could.
Lovely. Welcome to the August 24th installment of UIDRB. Hopefully you're in the right spot. The next meeting is September what? No.
It'll be Wednesday, October the 4th. It's the rescheduled date that's definitely.
Ah, okay. Okay, get a little bit of extra time. That's good.
See what happens when you.
I know. Soon you lose. I should spurn the city staff. You've not forgotten how to do that. Third March, okay. I swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Me too.
Thank you very much. Did everyone have an opportunity to review the minutes from last month?
You do the roll call.
Oh, that's right. Always get out of order.
Here. Ms. Dunkelman?
Here.
Ms. Jones?
Here.
Ms. Parker? Here. Mr. Reeves?
Here.
Mr. Sublet?
Yes.
Mr. Szymanski?
Present.
Carrie will be, Keone will be present, he'll just be here around 4:30. Thank you, we have a quorum.
Back to the minutes. Did everyone have a chance to look at the minutes from last month?
Yes.
Any revisions and clarifications? Hearing none, would you like to call the roll?
Yes, Ms. Gunselman?
Yes.
Oh, wait, do we have a motion?
Motion to approve?
I'll second that.
All right, Ms. Gunselman?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
I have to abstain.
That's good. Ms. Parker, sustain. Mr. Reed?
Abstain.
Abstain.
Well, we should sustain. Okay, so in that case, we can't pass these because we don't have a quorum on them.
Can we do it again when?
We can come around to it at the end, okay.
That's fine.
So do you still need to approve the minutes from the prior meeting in June when there was not a quorum last week?
So that was for June, right, that we were just.
No, I took July.
Oh, for July, okay, so we still need to do June then, yeah.
Do I have a
I
motion?
move.
I second.
Okay, Ms. Gunselman,
Abstain.
Ms. Jones,
Approve.
Ms. Parker. Abstain. Mr. Reed,
Approve.
Mr. Sublet,
Approve.
okay, Mr. Szymanski.
Approved.
Okay, the June one's passed, thank you.
You ready to roll?
Yep, ready to roll.
Okay, we'll hear UID 23-08-008, 2060 North High Street.
Yes. All right.
I need to abstain.
Thank you. All right, so 2060 North High Street is an existing commercial building built in 1988. The applicant is requesting board approval to reface an existing pole sign, window sign, and roof sign as a part of the tenant's rebranding. Staff notes the applicant has a previous certificate of approval for the roof and pole signs, which has been included for reference in the materials. The commission includes a site plan rendering and details for the proposed signage. We look at that quickly. So here, this is the existing pole signage and they're looking to reface it with the Duncan logo. This is technically a roof sign because it's mounted on this little roof here. But again, similar siding. And then this is the window sign in the building. And then you got to turn your head a little bit. These are just previous signs of approvals just for past reference. So after review, the proposal is generally consistent, or I'm sorry, is generally inconsistent with the university district plan. The plan recommends 2 signs per street frontage, while the proposal includes 3 signs on the North High Street frontage. The plan also recommends against illuminated cabinet signs, while the proposed roof and pole signs are illuminated cabinets. Further, the plan states that the window signs be transparent in nature and that the lettering should be less than 8 inches tall. The window sign as presented is not consistent with these guidelines. Staff recognizes these signs are existing. And then staff recommends that the applicant reduce the sign of the letters for the roof and pole sign to create a better balance between text and blank space. And for reference, the recommendation for wall signs is that lettering take up no more than 65% of the sign. Also, to ensure that the background of the roof and pole sign is opaque to minimize light spillage through the white, increase transparency of the window sign and reduce the size of the lettering to be 8 inches or less, and reduce the quantity of the signage to 2 signs. And so staff recommends approval with conditions, and the recommended conditions are that to reduce the quantity of the signage to 2 instead of 3, increase transparency of the window sign and reduce the lettering to 8 inches or less, reduce the size of the letters for the roof and full sign to take up no more than 65% of the sign, and then for the roof and the full signs to have an opaque background. So essentially for this, we're looking for 2 signs instead of 3 at the end of the day, and just reducing the scale of everything with the big letters. Thank you.
Is the applicant present?
Hi, Jim Hartley with SignCom. How are you?
Very good, thank you. Would you raise your right hand? Got to swear you in. For tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Thank you very much. Do you have anything you'd like to add to the city review?
Yes, sir, I do. First of all, we're just eliminating Baskin Robbins. It was Baskin Robbins and Dunkin' combined. The signs are existing. We're simply refacing them. They're grandfathered in. We got certificates last time to reface them using the full-size signs. I don't know why now we would have to greatly reduce the graphics in those existing signs. Secondly, the window signage, they're referring to window lettering, 8 inches to ½ inch. This is not window lettering. This is an existing cabinet sign. We're simply sliding a new face in the cabinet. So I think they're confusing window sign with window lettering. So I think it'd be a shame to reduce the signage. It's already there. We're just refacing it because Baskins and Robbins is not feasible in there anymore. Dunkin's probably doing a lot better sales wise. So I would understand if these were new signs to have to reduce the size and such, but they're existing grandfathered in. We're simply refacing the existing signs that are there.
Can we go to street view, make sure that it's going to show up on?
So this is looking north on High Street. And so this is an existing pole sign, which is correct. And they're just looking to rebase this.
Okay, that was the combination
Yeah.
slash.
Duncan, and then
Okay.
there's leaves, but you can see it there. And then if we turn a little bit, this is the roof sign here, and with 2, and they're switching now to Duncan. And then this is hard to see because this sign, let me scooch over. And then here, this is a cabinet. I think the reason why maybe Stephanie classified it as a window sign is because this is a big window and you can see it through the window. And so we classified it as a window sign instead of like a wall sign, for example, just because of it being mounted on a window. But again, you see the coffee cup and the Baskin Robbins, and they're just looking to switch that out.
If I may, again, it was referring to window lettering, not window signs. So the small copy for putting on a door or a window, your hours and stuff would be restricted to 8 inches. This is not vinyl lettering on a window or a door. This is an existing sign. It would look unusual to put a face in there where the graphics were drastically smaller than the cabinet. It just doesn't.
So the one that's attached to the building, that's actually a cabinet, because it looks like you can almost see the glazing is divided up.
I think it's inside the window, but it's a cabinet with divider bars and light bulbs in it. Yeah, it's been there. It was there when we occupied the space, yes.
I mean, I thought you were referring to it as that, like, to me, when you look at that, you look at the Dunkin' Donuts and Baskin Robbins, it seems more appropriate than this big Dunkin' that just takes it and says one word. I think that's more of my issue of that the other one has the graphics, the coffee cup, there's more white, as Belkis said. I personally don't have a problem with all 3 because those are already there. You're filling space that's already up there. It's gonna look worse if it's empty, as long as they're kind of the right size within that space. And even when you look at the roof, there's the coffee cup, there's the BR, the actual Dunkin' Donuts part is smaller. Like, I think there can be more than just this big Dunkin' that takes up 95% of the height.
So my question to that is that, given the fact that you're not advertising 2 businesses but one, why couldn't Dunkin' just occupy the width of the sign like the ones below it, and then it's not looking out of place? Because Looks a little odd.
Which one?
What do you mean?
Well, that since,
It is taking up both the two.
no, I know that, but I'm just saying that there's not two separate businesses. So the previous sign, had you been advertising Baskin Robbins and Dunkin', it would have been tiny occupying, but now you're only doing one. So if the Dunkin' were as wide as the supports of the sign, I think it would look more in keeping with the scale versus this.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's,
If I might add, the sign below it, Joy's Village, hasn't been restricted to using only a portion of the face. None of the other tenants have been restricted to only a portion of their face. I don't know why we'd be singled out to only use a portion
So,
of
so
our.
from my point of view, it's a comparative graphic situation. And in each of the three circumstances we're looking at, the Duncan sign looks out of place because the letters are so large. So comparatively in contrast, any place else you see it in the context of other signage, the letters are smaller. So it jumps out. Perhaps that's what an advertiser wants. But as a citizen and as somebody with an aesthetics background, I don't find it desirable. So I'm inclined to agree with staff that something needs to be done to balance the fact that you're gonna, marketing around just that one word, people know the word, you don't need the graphics, that's your choice. But then the letters have to be marginally diminished in size so that you still can get the other graphics to read in a balanced way. So that's a graphic design challenge, because I think what you're doing right now is not successful within the context.
What would be acceptable span, that, we've certainly considered that when we laid out the copy. We never run the copy clear to the ends. We like negative space. We've used the appropriate negative space, but what are you considering
So that would be your job as a graphic designer to decide that. That isn't for me to decide, but I can tell you when it's not right.
Okay,
I think what's happening in my mind, and I'm not a graphic designer, but you're trying to take a sign that was this length and this height for different graphics and then taking one word and trying to fit it in there. If you had to do this over again, you wouldn't have that length and width of the sign for the one word of Dunkin'. You would design that sign to be a different size so that it feels more appropriate. But I get what you're trying to do is reuse the existing sign, but that single word doesn't work in that context.
And this is staff, I do want to note that for, the recommendation for wall signs is that lettering take up no more than 65% of the sign. So that may be a barometer, to use.
I'll be happy to do those calculations, but I would say we're less than 65% if you're just counting the graphics. I mean, there's more than 35% of white there, but we'll do the math for you. If you like.
Well, but visually, you draw a rectangle around the outside of the things, not every single square inch of. So you
Oh,
can't.
no, it says 65% of the area, not the span or such, 65% of the sign area. So our letter height by our letter span, I would think will be close to that, but we'll do those calculations if that's what we're restricted.
Yes, and staff is providing guidelines. So no guidelines can be definitive about what's desirable from a graphic sense, just trying to help you. So once you've designed it in a way that you believe is aesthetically pleasing, desirable, part of our job is not only to follow the guidelines, but also to make sure that it's working in the context with all of the other surrounding situations. Safety, views from the street, other businesses,
I would just hate
likewise supported.
for my client to be restricted when this restriction isn't carried out in other places for refacings.
Well, I think all clients go through the same procedure of approval. And so as far as any other change in graphics, they would have to go through the same set of questions. So in the case of, for instance, the Joy graphic beneath it, Joy Village, what we see there is a different relationship between the size of the graphics, the size of the background, the amount of text and so on. And so in the dialogue between the two of them, the scale of Duncan is off. It's the wrong scale for the rest of the surrounding graphics.
The other thing I'd add to that is that I don't think I think it's a stretch to say it's grandfathered because we're not changing the sign. What was in there before was of a different scale, so you can't take two smaller lettering heights and then say, well, I'm erasing that and I'm gonna have one bigger word and claim it's the same thing because it's not visually, so.
If I may, Joy's has less negative or background space than Duncan's cabinet. There's less yellow and than there is white and Dunkin', so we have more negative space. I understand it's larger, but the sign's much larger. That was the anchor tenant, so they got a larger
I
sign.
think at least you're missing my point is, there's Joy's Village Chinese food all within a sign. You have 6 letters that are blown up to take that amount of size. It says less, and that is oversized for the sign. For me, it's not about that it's exactly 65 or it's the amount of the background, it's how it looks on that background.
I'm not sure the aesthetic issue can be reduced to calculations. I would instead urge you to keep in mind KB's key word, which was balance.
How do we get approval based on, can you give us a percentage or something so we can say we'll approve it with this stipulation, or do we have to do more designs for your review?
Well, as an example, I don't find that one nearly as objectionable.
That's because the cabinet's a taller cabinet and you run out of height before you run out of span. It just happens that Duncan more comfortably proportions fits the pylon sign.
It just doesn't overwhelm you visually as much as the other one does, is my point.
And it's closer in graphics to the text beneath it. It's not quite as,
Remarkably larger.
remarkably large as the others.
This is staff, just from what I'm hearing, a possible way forward would be, to approve on the condition that the pole sign and then the sign on the roof, the lettering be limited to the 65%. And then that way, this sign remains as is, since it seems like we're amenable to that. And then we're just changing this roof sign and then this pylon sign to reduce the scale of the Dunkin' to no more than 65% of the overall space. That could be a condition of approval for staff review. So then, once you submit your final drawings, it would be to staff, you would review it, and you would approve it at the time. That's the one option.
Yeah, my one concern about that is the roof sign. Because the roof sign is already too large, and because it was originally designed for 2 very different kind of signs, the idea that now they come and simply fill, again, formula problem that Tim mentions, it's not necessarily graphically successful to just fill that space. So following up on what Delphus is offering, I agree that the sign within the cabinet context, or the one that at the cabinet context, that I can live with that one because the graphics or the density of the Dunkin' text is only so much denser than Fix or the other graphics there. It's bigger, it's bolder, but it's only a relatively small percentage more than that. So it doesn't completely overshadow the others. Regarding the other 2 signs, the relationship, in both cases, the same problem. You're filling a space that the 6 letters wouldn't originally have filled. Those things were the context, the framework was designed for a totally different graphic and a totally different content. So I think now you've got a bigger problem to solve. If you keep the signs that big, you have to do something very creative to not overpower everything else around it. So I would not feel comfortable giving a 65% formula and saying coming back for staff approval. I feel like you really do need to do something more creative, more sensitive, more intelligent, more beautiful for those 2 signs. And I do feel like you need to come back for full board approval.
My client did just point out to me a great point that this is the new Dunkin' corporate logos. They have eliminated the cup and so forth. So this is their latest new corporate update. So that is the new Dunkin' logo. So can you give me some direction so we're not back and forth with designs? Can you read the letter height that's now? Maybe what letter height would be somewhere to start? The letter height now is 34 inches on a 55-inch cabinet,
I have a question.
which is 3 feet out of a 6 foot, almost a 6 foot tall cabinet. So I think that's.
So you're the designer, I'm sorry, I missed that.
I'm not a designer, I'm a business owner, but I have a staff of great designers.
Okay, sweetie. I just was wondering, based on like some of the feedback that you're hearing, and then maybe just reducing the size of the text, what is your thoughts visually on that as compared to how that's gonna, because I understand I sympathize with what you're saying about the fact that this is already created, this space is already created, and we're really just trying to fill it. So I do understand that, and I also understand the fact that it's a logo and that has to be the same across the board. I think I was just trying to understand a little bit more as to like how that would look visually, and also kind of hear your all's opinion if it was just smaller, then it's just smaller text with a bunch of white around it. So I don't know if it would get much better in this situation, or is it just a matter of like, it's saying something different? Which I don't know if the client would be willing to.
I don't know if it's, for me, I don't know if it's, there's no way, because I agree with you, there's no way it's just, hey, increase to this size from your grid. I mean, it could be that there's a color band. If you, I feel pretty positive in this. If you were designing this from the beginning and that sign didn't exist, this is not what you would be presenting to us.
It would be, their brand new standard would be very similar, that much negative space. The cabinet might change a little bit because I think we've got more end space than top space, but that cabinet proportionally fits Duncan pretty good. The other one in the window doesn't. That's why the letter height is so small, because you run out of span. And graphically, you don't want to run copy clear to the end. It looks incorrect, like you didn't know what you were doing as a sign company. Negative space is valuable. So I just want some direction. I mean, and I'm not being sarcastic, 3 inches smaller letter height, 4 inches smaller. It's at 34 inches now.
I will offer you this. No letter should be more than 10% larger than any other graphic that you see within that particular context. And if that gives you too much white space around your Duncan lettering, then look at the potential of setting up a frame. So you can still have the proportion that you want between letter and white space to edge, but use the remaining part of the found framework that you're working within and create like a matte framework or a different color framework around that, so that you can still play nice with the others, stay within the context of the graphics that are there, but create a more compelling, more graphically and aesthetically pleasing environment for your text. Your text no more than 10% larger than any other graphics within that.
10% larger than Joy's text?
That's right, no more than 10% larger than Joy's text.
Which those are pretty.
I think you'll be surprised when you see that on a drawing. That'll be
Love to
like
see
it.
it. Bring it.
Okay.
And I think what I'm hearing is, maybe the text is just there, but maybe there could be a border of
I don't know
a
if
pink
corporate-
color or.
I don't know if they're-
Orange color
yeah.
around it,
Okay.
so it's not all white, there's a border around there.
You can shrink the size.
Essentially puts the logo onto a field that contrasts it.
So what I'm hearing is, this pole sign and the roof sign, I'm hearing that maybe those should be continued. Is there an option for this sign to get approved tonight as its own singular item? And then they could come back for, these two signs?
Bill, because I don't know if it's in best interest to give them 1 out of 3,
Okay.
probably because of the consistency they want in their graphic logo. So it may be
Yeah.
that once they, they're nuts between the 3,
Yeah.
it may be that once they get a better framework and size, they'll want to use the same border on the 3rd, or not, because I would agree that the 3rd one, that smaller one, could stand alone.
The wall or roof sign, we don't have any other graphics to compare it to. What do
Oh,
we?
you got a lot of them. You have the National Guard sign and the sign that's lower on the, around the corner. Belkis just showed that to you when she gave the
Okay.
National Guard sign right there.
Okay. There's spans end to end, top to bottom.
And what I'm saying, I'm less concerned about that because that sign was designed deliberately for that space. And as was pointed out earlier, you're retrofitting a framework that wasn't designed for the 6 letters. So you now have the problem of making the whole greater than the sum of the parts. So what I'm suggesting to you is each of your 6 letters, no one of them would be larger than 10% more than any of the letters of National Guard. Does that make sense?
Yep, I'll get a measurement on National Guard and add 10% and we'll see how that looks.
There's also the text that's beneath, on the wall, perpendicular to National Guard. Something.
That logo's drastically taller than D and Duncan.
So what we face is also the comparative relationship of contrast. So that one doesn't have, I think it lights up at night, but in the context, its contrast is less jarring than what we're at least seeing graphically in the way you're presenting it. But look at the size of the volume of the roof sign that we're seeing here. It's enormous compared to the other ones. And when it has a lot more texture and color, it's less demanding to the eyes, less overtaking of the focus of the sidewalk than, what you're proposing.
How do you feel about the recommendation for opaque backgrounds? It's a white face. It does not work well for opaquing.
I'm not sure what does that mean?
They want the background to be opaque, not too light.
Was that the recommendation for the roof one, Belkis? I'm sorry, I remember you reading the recommendation.
Talk about ensure the background of the roof pole sign is opaque to minimize light spillage through the white. So just making sure it's not real solid white.
Yes.
Sometimes some whites are more translucent, so just.
Opaque means non-translucent.
Sure.
So we're allowed to have the white illuminated?
Yeah,
Okay.
So am I hearing that you want to continue this, so they could come next month? Is there a motion for that?
So moved.
Second. Okay, I have a move and a second. Ms. Gunselman? She's, oh, right, she refused, right. Ms. Jones? Ms. Parker?
yes.
Mr. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. Sutcliffe?
Yes.
Mr. Semansky?
Approved. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Was Laurie here last month? Lie. She was.
I was here, I don't know.
I would get,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sure.
Rob, and that's sure, figure it out.
And Belkis just firearms, so.
Thank you. Good to see you, Keon.
Can't get rid of it, can you?
Had to come back, I miss you all.
We miss you.
So before we move to the next case, I don't want to forget about this. We need to, Keone, we couldn't do it in your absence, but I know you were here last month. We need to approve the minutes from July. So do I have a motion to approve those?
So moved.
And I'll second.
So that's motion. Second, Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Ms. Gunzelman,
Yes.
Ms. Jones, Ms. Parker,
abstain.
Mr. Reed,
Abstain.
Mr. Sutcliffe. Yes. Mr. Semansky.
Yes.
Okay, they passed. Thank you.
Okay. Moving swiftly to UID 23-08-010, 19 East 13th Avenue.
Yes, so this is 19 East 13th Avenue, so the applicant is requesting a conceptual review of the new event space between Midway and Ethel and Tank. The proposal includes the construction of a 2-story, 35-foot event space that would connect Midway and Ethel and Tank buildings and enhance ADA accessibility for both parties. For both properties. Also, a concrete patio expansion at Ethel and Tank to include planters and trees and a public facing mural along the retaining wall. And the application includes site plans, elevation sections, and renderings. I'm just looking at those quickly. So here's some concept photos of the area. There's a narrative here, and then you can see here, this is the site as it is today. So there's just currently surface parking lot in the middle. And the proposal would, effectively do infill for this space of the new building. Here you have a sort of a street elevation showing the whole span. And then here you have a section kind of seeing through all of the buildings to see how they relate to one another. Again, another one here. And then this is just sort of a rendering of showing, this is looking southeast. And then this is looking southwest. Some more renderings. And then after review, the proposal is generally consistent with the University District Plan. The site is recommended for regional mixed use with an FAR of 1. The plan also recommends that new construction be of high quality design and materials, compatible with the surrounding neighborhood and have a dynamic mapping, and include high levels of transparency on the ground floor. The proposal is consistent with these recommendations. However, the plan also states that rooftop structures, canopies, and awnings be designed in a manner to minimize negative offsite impacts of light and sound. Staff requests additional information to demonstrate that noise mitigation has been considered as a part of the design. Finally, staff recommends the applicant take the University District Plan recommendations regarding building and site design, materials, lighting, landscaping, and parking into consideration as the design continues to develop. And the applicant should be mindful of the applicable land use category standards and engage with the Department of Building and Zoning Services to identify any needed variances. Thank you.
Thank you.
I see the applicants here, and you swear whoever's gonna speak in.
Yeah, well, let's just all just.
Once it's fine. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you very much. Give any additional comments or response to the city's review or any additional information you'd like to provide?
Well, I can probably talk a little bit about the general concept of the plan. I think it's might be helpful to understand it. It is not a very big project, but it's a fairly complex project just because the fact that we have to connect two existing structure that has different floor levels, and we really try to connect all three to be basically one new structure, but not losing their own characters, so to speak. As you can see here, we basically take over the parking lot in between Ethel and Tang, which is on the east side, and Midway on the west side. A parking lot that oftentimes is being used for event space. And we want to create a more structured space for those events. And also, there are also all kinds of different events from, Ohio State students or, different neighborhood, organization. I mean, even just within Ohio State, I think there are like more than 1,000 student association that would come to Midway from time to time to want to have their own private events. But the fact that it's really hard to do with lack of space. So this is really a solution for that, to create a more structured and enclosed space, and at the same time to elevate that, to create a second floor. I would call it it's not exactly a rooftop patio technically, because it has the ability to close in the winter time.
So you can't condition it.
We would not have cooling, I think. So it's like it's almost like a covered patio that you will see on the ground.
Like a three-season.
Exactly. So there might be some heating in the winter, but it won't be, air conditioners won't be a completely weather enclosed structure.
Not that this matters, but I'm just curious, do you intend to connect building to building, or is each building's ingress and egress work independently? So there's no.
Good question. So right now, obviously the two building can operate independently in terms of ingress and egress. And our building do the same thing, except that they are connected. And so they have additional way to get in and out of the building, basically. So basically what you see in the elevation, I think one of the things that we want to hear from you guys today really is to first of all, we are still in the conceptual phase. And so I think the first thing as you do in designing any buildings is that you look at the site, you look at density, you look at the massing, you look at see if it is appropriate from that standpoint in terms of fitting in between the two existing structure. Then you start looking at the form, the shape of the building, right? And then the use of the building, obviously, and then not the last, but and then the next thing is that you look at the composition, how the building is organized from an aesthetic standpoint, from a proportion standpoint, especially in the facade, because to be honest, the buildings really have one facade for the most part, because they're basically very close on two sides, and then the back is really butt against the back building that is quite a bit taller than us, the Newport. And so it's really, we're considering one facade facing north, but then you have a little bit on both sides that you can see, and we try to create something that connect the two buildings, in terms of the roof line of midway that comes down and it becomes the railings, the profile of the railing on the balcony, on the second floor. And then the floor lines on the second floor actually match the Ethel and Tang floor lines on the second floor as well. So they can connect with a short bridge on the other side. And so, so those are the consideration, and at the same time create a taller space that none of those two currently has. So think about it. Ethel and Tang is an old structure, you know, more than 100 years old, and the floor to floor height is about 10 foot basically, right? So, you know, they did a good job to create a double height space inside if you have been inside Ethel and Tang. But it's still a 10-foot floor to floor ceiling height. You know, Midway is similar, you know, it's have even shorter floor to floor height on the basement, has slightly higher on the upper floor. So we're creating a almost 14-foot floor to floor height in the new space to really upgrade that. That's open space that can have a lot of flexibility for all kinds of community events. So that's really kind of the whole concept.
Tim, a question about the relationship to the existing sidewalk. So it looks as though the infill is projecting out over the sidewalk. Is that right?
No, it's not. So the sidewalk, if you look at the site plan, actually, we can look at the site plan, it might be easier to see. So if you look at the site plan, this particular site has a really fairly wide sidewalk, I would say. It's probably about 8-foot sidewalk outside of our property line. You can kind of see the dash lines of our property line there. And so some of the existing patio space is within our property, but it kind of looks like it's part of sidewalk, but it's not in terms of the property line. So our balcony project out, but actually still have about 3 feet before you hit the property line. So so it's not projecting over the property line, I guess, or the sidewalk for that matter.
So you don't need a variance for that.
No.
But it's clear in your drawings and in the images that it's changing the dimension of the existing sidewalk. It projects, right? We can see in the graphics that it projects forward. Show us again the image here, right? So it's projecting beyond. So does where the upper level comes forward, is that at the same alignment with the, where the retaining wall meets the ground further to the east? It's the same, comes out at the same edge?
Sorry, can you?
Yeah, so where the elevated, I don't know if it's a balcony or mezzanine or the back of seating, where it comes out now, right? That alignment aligns with the retaining wall further to the east at grade.
Right, correct, yes.
And what I'm seeing in these drawings is not what is currently on site. So where you're showing a retaining wall and a barrier fence is currently a sloped landscaped area. So, right.
Not on the
Maybe
midway side.
Belkis could show us
Yeah.
the image on 13th Avenue.
So it's my understanding that part of the proposal is also to modify the Ethel and Tang balcony
Yes.
space as well.
Yes.
So taking out this existing
Yeah, there we go.
and
Yes.
So
extending the
that is what I'm
patio
talking about, because that's an extremely changed nature of 13th Avenue, right? So, but I guess that raises more concerns for me. You know, you're really changing the landscape of the street.
Right, that's,
And of course, we've talked about that before. You've come before us before and we haven't approved it. So I'm wondering what you've done this time that would make it more appealing.
well, I think we're not focusing on the patio right now. I mean, obviously we can talk about patio in more detail, but in my opinion, I think just because there is a landscape there right now, doesn't mean has always been there. In fact, it was not there before.
But it's
Ethel and Tang was moved in there. So
Yeah.
what I'm saying is change is possible and it should be allowed. It should not be like, oh, if you have this thing now, you should never be able to change anything. And I think it's important to also point out that there are different ways that we want to deal with the landscape. You know, the patio is only about, 4.5 feet above the sidewalk. So you're not really blocking your sight line technically. And so what we want to do is that we want to maximize the usable space, but still allow some landscape, such as a planter with a tree, to be creating that kind of canopy that
I
we are
would
not.
never say
not
that
there.
change is not possible. But
I
I
don't
do
think
want to
so.
be clear, I do want to be clear, because when you answered Carrie's question, you talked about joining these two disparate parts, and we focused on the center element. What I'm seeing as I look at the current condition of 13th Avenue is a major change in the fabric of the street because of the amount of space that that portion of the building occupies is going to have a major impact on the nature of the landscape and the sitescape and the cityscape and the urban experience. I just want to be clear about what we're discussing and what we're looking at.
Sure.
Okay. My other question is, have you at all looked at, because of all the complaints I hear about the noise that comes from that area now, did you ever look at rotating the centerpiece, the new addition? In other words, having the stage back, so it's a closed work of building and architecture to the 13th Avenue side, so that the projected noise goes against the masonry building to the other side.
So,
Would you like me to speak to sound, or are you more speaking about the architecture?
Both.
Well, I can
well, but
speak
the
to-
architecture, if it is from the concern of the sound, I think we should maybe
Sure, I can
talk
speak to
about that,
sound,
because I
yeah.
think obviously there's a whole bunch of things that you probably have heard that turns out to be actually not
Sure,
true, but anyway.
I can speak to the sound. So we did a few sound studies, and I'm happy to share them with you, Ms. Jones, about how far the sound from that parking lot can travel, and it's about 3 blocks, basically. And and that is uncovered at full volume. And so I think perhaps there might be a misconception about how far the sound can travel.
I just wondered if you'd ever thought about looking at the.
Yeah, that's why I was like, I think you're
Yes,
actually
no question.
more talking about architecture than how far the sound is gonna go, but I'm happy to discuss the details of sound.
I mean,
I think Pai Tim's more qualified
Yeah.
to speak on the aesthetic.
yeah, and when you say
There is
facing,
a misconception, because
I'm sorry,
I
say
live
again?
about a block away from Tim, and I can hear sound from the Ohio Stadium
Yeah.
when the weather conditions are right.
Sure.
I haven't heard it recently, but there was, I think pre-pandemic, there were nights where I could hear sound from it. Like, it's the nature of sound. Sound's kind of funny. It depends on weather conditions and humidity, but I think it's a little disingenuous to say it's not going to travel over 3 blocks. I mean, in general,
That's not my opinion. This is from 2 audiologists, and I'll be happy to share the report.
I
And
work
we have
with lots
police
of-
officers.
Yeah, I work with lots of acousticians.
Okay.
And
Well,
they are experts, but within a rather narrow range.
well,
So,
if the council would, I'm happy to discuss it, but I don't want to sidetrack on. something.
yeah, I mean, I think that's what I would say in general is, look, the parking lot is not a huge asset. So, in general, I'm in favor of getting rid of a shitty parking lot and putting something better in its place. I think the design is a handsome one. I think, KB raises some points about the expansion of the apple tank patio, whether that negatively changes the street presence. I'm not sure. I mean, I think overall, I think it's a nice design scheme. I think the second story open air rooftop event deck does give me a little bit of pause. I do not believe for an instant that if you have a loud music event up there, that it's not going to go further than 3 blocks. But I think, I think you can think a little bit about it, maybe enclose a second floor, maybe it's a double height performance space and it's enclosed. It might be more amenable if it, had a solid roof, but you had opening garage doors, so in good weather, you could kind of go in and out. So I guess all of this is to say I'm not opposed to it, but I think you need to give some serious thought to what sound leakage is. KB lives way closer than I do to you all. I'm quite sure she hears a lot more.
I mean, just briefly to continue that point, your narrative does make the claim that the project mitigates the noise factor. My question is, does that take the effect of the rooftop space into consideration? And making sure that overall claim of mitigation includes the effect of having the open rooftop area?
I mean, I would say that we're definitely open to the idea of having the roof being more enclosed, but at the same time, I would also argue that we cannot look at the design in a in a very extreme and irresponsible way that, oh, the design has to basically accommodate the most irresponsible way of using that space, meaning that having a really loud music events on the rooftop that completely disregard, the neighbors. I mean, the fact that we have 2 floors right now is because we feel like if there's really loud kind of events, it can be on the first floor, right? So before we can't even do that, right? Before it's just a parking lot. You can't even do that. So I think that is one way that we feel like this is how we can address that particular issue, and then we can talk about, okay, on the second floor, how do we, on the rooftop, we keep calling it rooftop. It's really a cover patio, in my opinion, because they're meant to be covered. I know that right now it shows open, because I think the spirit is that we want to make it open and welcoming. It's not a nightclub kind of situation where it's completely blank, facade, and then you just walk into a small door into a basement, so that's kind of the idea, is that we want to project this idea that it's not a dark and, dingy kind of experience. It's an open, and and I don't know, I mean, you guys can talk about the operation. I don't know how much of that it would be a very loud music events that everyone just assume that it automatically happen every single night, right?
Tim, let's use the Newport as an example, a very successful music performance space. We're not walking into a dark, dingy basement to go into the Newport. It has a monumental facade on High Street.
Sure.
You could create a very beautiful facade it's inviting people into an indoor or quasi-indoor outdoor space that contains the event within the space. Instead of presenting it as though people are hanging off over the balcony, I don't anticipate, given the problems that have been in this space, and we're all very familiar with how problematic this place has been for a number of years, the idea of producing a piece of architecture in a well-managed event space, I think is a terrific idea. What I'm seeing here is not the kind of desirable work of architecture to make an event space with a cultural identity that I would like to see. So that's where I'm looking at what components of this right now are not as successful as potentially could be. Number one, I could see really creating an enclosed environment where the sound is much more responsibly contained. The nature of producing a high quality music performance space has integrity. And that would require having something that doesn't just have all of it spilling out on the street, number one. Number two, taking into consideration, you got a very difficult cryptic composition. I wouldn't try to make a composition that joins them. I would try to have integrity for the 3 independent facades. You're not intending to do anything with Midway right now, you're leaving it alone. But the amount of compositional energy and design focus that's going into the other 2 offer a lot greater design potential. I'm disappointed by the fact that you come in with a facade that's removing a quality right now that is desirable and not even talking about it. So the idea that there's a portion of 13th Avenue that's a very desirable landscape space, that where the whole is greater than some of the parts, you have a community-like space in that street, but that wasn't presented to us as a change that we were asked to consider. I'm disappointed by that. So I'm not seeing anything right now that really makes me think that this is a great new contribution to enhance the quality of the space. And I think that there's lots of opportunities to do that better.
I do have a question, or, it can be a comment to add to it. So, based on what we read in the, University District Plan, one of the qualities.
Speak into the microphone.
Oh, sure. Thank you. So one of the design principles that he mentioned is really about activating the streets. And then the idea of having the second balcony, be able to have a connection to the street, it is part of the spirit, because imagine that if it is a completely enclosed space, and which is not exactly, in ours trying to create, that atmosphere, Ohio State, because a large portion of the clients actually coming from Ohio State, they're students, they want to be connected to the streets. And then I think, the idea of, simply focusing the noise or the events, time that they would generate, and then that would negatively impact the neighborhood. I think it is unfair to this piece of architecture, because it has this, maybe 90% of the time during the day, the student just doing their own thing and connecting to the street. So I don't want to discount the positivity that the, piece of architecture is bringing to the, to the 13th Avenue.
Play examples
Can I say
of
something
balconies over
to
the street
maybe-
on High Street, food environments where people can sit outside and eat. So I'm not opposed to that per se. What I am not understanding that's virtuous about this project for that context in that neighborhood is that this is a place really, I don't know exactly what's happening on the balcony, but I think it's people, what's happening on that space? What's the mode of inhabitation
Which one, which space?
on the balcony in the new addition?
So
So-
specific model.
Yeah.
I can speak. So this isn't actually designed to be a music venue like Newport. Really, the intent of this building is to be able to create a space that can accommodate different events, the different partnerships, the different rentals from all the, natural business, student organizations. The rooftop is really meant to be able to be adjusted and moved in the direction of whatever event or whatever private use of the space from our customer base. That being said, if there is a music event, and that's something that we definitely have been like truly thinking about and like really putting our minds to it, how do we absolutely create it positive and really readjust the mindset of what the current perception is about Midway
Yeah.
and that particular concept?
Yeah.
Because a lot of it is, to be fair to you guys, perception is reality. But in actuality, a lot of the perception is truly not as it seems,
I'm
So,
gonna disagree a little with that.
Yeah.
'Cause I drove up High Street Friday, before the first week of classes, and I saw the scene on Midway. I mean, which is fine. I mean, the kids are young and first weekend back, it's what they're gonna do, but it is an impediment for you. And we all know what, an open air bar space generally turns into right now in this neighborhood. And dude, I drive up High Street, I teach at OSU, I have a ground floor view of the life of the city in the university, and I'm fine. But I think it's a little disingenuous to claim otherwise. I think like I said, I mean, for me, I think the aspiration is good, not to miss the parking lot. But I do think you need to give some serious consideration to the impacts of the proposed, use of the space.
yeah, I just want to be crystal clear. In no way we're trying to be disingenuous here. We're not trying to create a false narrative of a concept that we're trying to present. We definitely celebrate youth and the collegiate life and the experience of gathering and just that energy. We're just trying to do it in an elevated way. We're trying to be able to create a space that we can truly adjust the narrative, truly represent our company, our brand, our students, our community in a much better way. Add an element to 13th and this part of the neighborhood that can stand on its own and not just be another corporate kind of bland kind of structure. Really also embrace the small business, the local owners to stay alive in this big city. So we obviously respect and appreciate these comments, and from our part, the feedback that we're hearing is appreciative, and we're gonna, as a team, make adjustments based on your comments, but the space right now, from a rooftop standpoint, I just want to make it crystal clear, it's not meant to be a music venue. The space upstairs and downstairs are meant to share a similar path of being able to be curated and adjusted towards the customer's needs.
So I got a couple of things. So is it your intent that, this is not here to there, I'm just curious, that you could presumably have you could have simultaneous events, separate events going on floors 1 and 2?
Of course, yes.
So, which is fine. I think you should at least consider recognizing this is not a music venue. I mean, I get it, but you're gonna have shows up there. And the fact is, if you've got a band playing up there, it's gonna be loud as hell all around that. So let's not kid ourselves. It is what it is. So depending on how frequently you envision doing that, I would consider maybe it's not as open air as it is now. I think you could do a transparent looking building that has the ability to kind of close itself off. So whether that be garage doors that face whatever street this is, 13, and maybe the top has got, so maybe your vaulted ceiling goes higher and you've got like a clear story glass or something that you could open or shut, so it's not like you heat it in the wintertime. But if you do have a band there, you've got the ability to kind of close the thing up at night and where it's not all just blaring out into the neighborhood. As it relates to ethylene tank, you know, with the loss of the landscape. I mean, I get that you've got a larger patio, which I appreciate. You might consider knocking it back 3 or 4 feet and you just do a landscape bed or something that could be a seat wall along that. And you've got an elevated landscape bed, you've got something. So, I mean, I've got mixed feelings about landscape in the university district in the sense that it's just gets torn up. I mean, you do something nice and people rip it out of the ground.
That's the biggest struggle we have.
So I've got mixed feelings about, you know,
Okay,
it's pretty on paper until it sits there for a week, so.
right.
No, I would disagree. My flower boxes have made it, months so far.
Right. Now, I want to follow with that because I know it's a very contentious issue. You know, KB, we haven't been back for 2 years and it's for a reason. And I don't want to talk about all the things happened between these 2 years. But what I'm saying is that if you haven't heard that, I would encourage you to talk to the staff about it. Maybe they can give you some information about that, or maybe not, I don't know. But Keone, you know, I don't want to argue with a neighbor, but I just want you to know that, you know, we come in here, we're not trying to lie to you to your face. And so when you say something like this is disingenuous, I want you to be very careful to think about that because it's not very respectful to say something like that, okay? I'm just saying.
So disingenuous is not saying lying. It's disingenuous is when you sort of shave the edges off an argument to make it sound more appealing. And I don't recall saying you were being disingenuous. I recall saying that the idea that this would never be loud and sound would not carry. Tim,
Well,
there's no
hold
reason,
on a second.
Tim,
I
there's
have
no
to
reason to argue here. You're a good architect. You guys have a nice scheme. And this is not a problem with you. Like, you guys have a nice project, but the track record has been that, you know, there have been loud events there and the sound has carried. It's disingenuous to say that I can't hear the sound from where I am because I can hear the sound from most U games. Not all the time. You have to, atmospheric conditions have to be absolutely right, but it does happen. All I'm saying
sorry.
is,
Do you guys mind if I feel like.
let me finish. All I'm saying is give some consideration to your business model and give some thought to a design that appropriately mitigates acoustic noise and sort of does what you want it to do, but maybe in a different way.
Fine, and I don't, we don't,
And let me add one last thing. A&R, great business group.
Yeah.
I live near the press, went there every week. The market, fantastic. I have nothing against you guys. Great business, love what you do. I'm fine with, you know, Midway. It's college kids. There's a segment of the population likes to drink themselves silly every Friday night. That's fine. But you need to give some consideration. How do you make this work from a business standpoint without overly burdening the neighbor?
yep, and I
That's all I'm
think,
saying.
I appreciate that comment.
This is Steph. I just want to maybe turn to new comments. I think we've heard about the sound. I'm curious from members of the board that haven't spoken yet, maybe Emma, Ryan, Lori, any thoughts that you have regarding the design?
I can start with that.
Lori.
Thank you for the presentation. I have not seen this before. It's my first time reviewing it. Thrilled to see the parking lot that really doesn't seem like it belongs there to be incorporated into something that's more architecturally pleasing. The connection for me between Midway and what you're doing, you know, part of what I'm looking at also, we've already talked about the sound, but architecturally, I was just looking at the materials because something that you haven't heard back from yet on. It is a beautiful design. I question a little bit about the use of the wood siding as a material option. It seems as though you're working with a masonry material on either sides, and while I wouldn't mind a contrast to those two, I'm not sure the wood siding would be something that I would choose specifically for this particular type of building. I also, I mean, it's definitely creating a different sort of generational aesthetic than what is existing there with Midway. But I believe that, I do like the separation of the buildings, that you're offering towards the east. As a separation and kind of giving it its own identity. As far as how it addresses the street, I do like the idea of the seat wall and maybe landscape, to be able to help soften that edge, and create a more sympathetic, connection to the street. And I was also concerned about the balcony when I saw it. And again, you are working with perception there. It is just what it is.
Yeah.
Staff, I do want to note that in their design from, I think maybe it was 2 years ago, there was a seat wall incorporated into the retaining wall.
We didn't beat that up.
And that, and I believe at that time, that composition of the board, there are different folks at that time, but I do recall that the board's general feeling towards the seawall, they felt that that was unsuccessful, given the projection of the seawall into the right of way with pedestrians or maybe someone with a cane walking or in a wheelchair.
I remember the design. It's part of.
So I just want to I don't want to send mixed messages.
Yeah, let me clarify, because I remember the design rather clearly. The issue was the seat wall was behind the property line, and because they were going to serve alcohol, it was enclosed by a fence.
Okay.
And so the urban presence was a little strange, and I can see KB nodding, because you had stuff at the level of the street, but it was behind the fence, and seat wall behind the fence, and it wasn't great, to, I guess, be right? Look, this one's not a big one for me. I think there are a half dozen ways to solve it. But I think you could pull, maybe it is worth, if the applicant wants to return for future hearing, pull the previous example just so we can have a conversation looking at what's there as opposed to recollection.
Can I ask some clarification, or if you want to have other people?
I'm curious what, Lori, if you had any other comments, I know we could talk about with Emma and Ryan as well. And then we could, get your thoughts and feedback. That way you hear from everyone.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to say thank you for submitting this. This was a little bit more exciting for me to see this design, because I haven't really seen anything that has kind of been displayed thus far since I've joined the board. I saw the arch of the roof and how it coincides with the arch at the Ohio Union. That was cool. I saw that nod before I even read it. So I was like, okay, I'm on the right page. So I like that. Because of COVID and the realities of trying to find outdoor spaces, I appreciate an outdoor space when I see it. I'm intrigued to know if I think there's some really cool ways to absorb sound. And I don't think that could be something that you could add in or have as protruding from certain structures to help with the sound. So I think that you could get a little creative there. I also love that you have a mural presented on the space, because anytime we can add independent artists from the community is always a great attribute. I also loved the railing on the second floor. I thought that was, I liked the way that looked. I thought it looked very clean. And I liked how it complemented the ones that are on the first level in front of both of those other separate buildings. I would have to agree about the plants. I think it'd be cool to see some more of that, but I understand that this is the beginning of this process, and so that's to come. So can't wait to see what you end up doing there. And garage doors are always nice, because as someone who is an artist, it's always really nice to be able to let in that open air whenever possible, especially if we're, in the age of what we are in. So I really appreciated this, but definitely agree with the people who live in close proximity about trying to mitigate some of those things and seeing what you can come up with.
Thank you.
I'll keep mine short. I mean, I think you mentioned that there was a possibility of closing the upstairs in winter. it's hard to see that in this design. I think there is a lot of ways that we've talked about creating indoor, outdoor space. And candidly, we live in Ohio, right? There's a lot of bad weather. I think that it's a more useful design if there's a way that it makes it more four seasons, but you can have open, it attacks the sound, it attacks aesthetic. There's a lot of ways that I think you can do that. It's not against having it mostly open air that can close down. In regards to the wall, I generally am a pragmatic person and believe that, I own property, you look at, hey, what's gonna happen? A seat wall to me would be the worst thing. It just invites undesirables, people there, drunk people laying down, so many things. I like the idea of the wall to keep it looking, it's easier to keep clean. I think there's a lot of landscaping you can do around that. That doesn't mean that there's not ivy in front or there's some planters that can't just be a wall and a railing. But there are creative ways of looking long-term of what idealistically, what looks best and what in reality is going to look like after people get a hold of it. So I generally done right. I don't know that this is the absolute right design of that wall and the patio and how it relates to the street. But I'm not hard set on that it has to be as it is now and there's no other way around that.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Jim, last. Or,
No, no.
do you all feel like you have a clear direction on how to evolve the design, or do you have any other questions or comments?
I mean, I think it seems to me that there is a lot of general consensus about the second floor and the enclosure of that. And I think we definitely go back and look at that. So, and I don't, I just want to say that, even though, obviously Ali's our client, but he's also our dear friend. And I understand from his, point of view, how much he suffered, mentally and financially in the past 2 years dealing with this particular property. And I apologize, Gioni, with my, being too confrontational to you, but I just know too much to see someone say, oh yeah, this is like, like, so
You have it half full. I think generally what I'm hearing is that the big issue is sound because what happened in the past. And I think there is an architectural solution. I mean, generally, the scales, look, you're a good designer, you do good work, the scale is good, the parking lot, no one's gonna miss. Like, I think if you guys can figure out a way to address concerns about sound and still make your business model work, you get a path forward.
Thank you.
Okay. And then obviously the other part of that is the patio, and I know that we don't really talk about, I know KB, you're very passionate about those things, but I just want to say, I mean, first of all, the design guideline didn't say anything about requirement of landscape. And second of all, like a lot of people are saying, it's really hard to keep those things, nice. And, a mural is not necessarily a worse change than what is there in terms of, being able to having more space. So I just hope that you can understand where we're coming from.
Look at the project holistically at your next visit. And I would just encourage you to present it holistically with all of the changes, with a clear focus, introducing to us what your proposal is and why. It just, that kind of got glossed over as we focused on one thing. And I think presentation could help tie it together so we can really understand what your goals are. We're not opposed to anything conceptually. Okay? Yeah.
I'd like to follow up on that. Can I call you KB?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. Earlier, it sounded like you said that there was a lot of things wrong or you were disappointed. It sounded like you were focusing on the architecture. And I think I heard in general, I don't like this, but I don't know if I heard what you would like. Can you offer what you would like, or maybe I misunderstood?
No, I think I can help you in the context of looking at an idea you're putting forth and do my best within the guidelines to offer you recommendations. But I don't automatically like or dislike anything. It's all about what the project is about, the big idea, how well it's executed, how well it's materialized, how well it's crafted, and how well it's designed with the intention of the full community in mind.
Sure, I understand that
You have to
concept.
do it well.
Right, in the abstract, I totally agree with you. I'm just wondering, is there anything from an architectural perspective about what Tim has created that you don't agree with?
I don't understand the question. It's
Is
not,
there anything architecturally about this presentation that you disagree with?
all the things that I articulated earlier.
Well, my question is, I heard a little bit about the mural,
What is the mural? I didn't hear a presentation of a mural.
the front of ethylene tank being changed from landscaping to that retaining. wall.
And that's a mural.
Yes.
That's the idea.
That's just a mock-up. We would work with a local artist like we have in the past.
Okay.
So KB, so I heard some hesitation about the landscape, a little bit about the second floor balcony perhaps being too far forward. Were there any other concerns that you had from an architectural perspective?
I think it was the sound, right? Were you messaging? You were mentioning about the sound, right? So the roof.
Okay, and just so that we can
You
address.
want to get back to that conversation. It looks like an unfinished building. But I think the other parameters, so aesthetically, I'm not fond of what I see right now, but I know Tim is a great designer and I know that as it gets developed, I'm much more concerned about what the big idea is, how this whole facade is working, what your attitude about 13th Avenue is. When we look at High Street and all the streets that come into High Street, by and large, it's a residential fabric that needs some interstitial thing. And this joint is one that could be much better than it is, but right now it has some qualities that aren't too bad. I would hope that whatever you do would make it better.
Okay, and
So-
so I'm asking is, what specifically would, in your view, make it better?
More landscaping.
Okay. Anything else?
Well, I'll see what you show me. I mean,
Well, this is what we've shown you, and we're asking you, how
I
can you
mean,
make it better?
you did not present the mural, you did not present the fact you're taking a slope landscape project.
It's-
Endeavors that we've discussed in the past.
That's presented, we're all looking at it.
Let me try and help.
Sorry, maybe I'm just, yeah, thank you.
What's your, background? What's your?
I'm an attorney, so I don't,
That is.
no architecture, I'm like, what
So-
can we tell?
No, I
them
mean,
to
it's-
change? Yeah.
Attorneys tend to focus on the specific, right? In architects, it's a little broader, more conceptual, and KB teaches KSA as I do. Like, I know Kate, I've known KB for a long time, and I think she approaches the project with an open mind, but what I'm hearing is for clarity of idea. Like,
Yes.
you come in, you present a concept, the concept is the building is, doing A, B, or C, whatever it is, and that the moves support the concept. And I'm sort of making up words for EKB. A little bit what I hear is the concept's not clear, like you have two existing buildings and there's a piece that connects them. And the piece doesn't quite, it hasn't figured out whether it's interstitial, a connector that somehow is a little more subservient to the two pieces, ethylene tank and midway. And so it recedes a little visually and also just as an idea. Or there are three pieces of equal presence and equal form.
Did you or did you not say that you didn't present the mural this time because it's not really done?
But it's not
and
finalized, no.
So you come back and present it, and we'll talk about it.
Well, do we have to
Like,
approve the mural? I mean, is that what we're talking about?
Well, you have to approve the changes that you're making to that facade for sure.
The facade is the landscape.
The
Okay.
facade of that whole building facade, that's a
retaining
public
wall.
street front.
Yeah, I mean, I think the suggestion is that even though your project is in the middle, really this is a whole thing, right? It's, you're not doing midway a lot, but you're doing the middle piece and you're making some changes to the ethylene tank portion. So present the scheme comprehensively, explain the changes, not just the new middle insert, but the changes to the ethylene tank piece. And I think we pieced together, there was a mural because someone said it, we saw it black and white, and we made the connection. But I think comprehensively present the scheme. The intent of the scheme is to do this. The basic concept is a connector between two existing buildings. The components are two-story performance pavilion, street wall, this to that, the other. So that I think we can, and have the right visual documents that show that, so that we can understand the totality of design.
Okay.
But I do want to say one thing, if you don't mind, guys. So the mural with the black, with the design on it, to me, that is a wonderful design because the rails on ethylene tank and the black and the mural with the building in the middle and the railing at midway, it's kind of really, it's not just, you know, a placeholder. This was actually properly designed to connect the entire, properties together.
No, it's a solid argument. I like the idea.
But-
This is staff. I just want to know, just so everybody's clear. So the board isn't here to approve the content of the
Yeah.
mural. That's pure artwork.
Yeah.
You can paint flowers, rainbows,
Sure.
whatever you'd like on there. But what we have to consider is the removal of that landscape, the extension of the, you know, square footage of the patio, and then the treatment of the material. So the railing choice, the stair location,
Sure.
the plantings of the trees on top of the patio, et
Yeah.
cetera. So I don't want to get too granular about like the content of the mural, because that's all within your
Yeah.
purview to choose.
Are you not concerned that at that level, at sidewalk level, it's gonna get damaged pretty quickly?
I think the current, unfortunately, like, you know, when we first designed and built the green space that we have, we were naive to understand how much of an issue and a, you know, safety and damage, and it's really like a lot of,
Upkeep.
yeah, and really safety, to be honest. People try to climb it and a lot of, so to us, like, we were trying to eliminate the potential obstacles that we've been facing.
Are you convinced that a mural is less susceptible to damage than landscape?
From a damage standpoint, the landscape is definitely easily damaged, you know, ripped out, garbage.
Yeah, a regular branch, it looks great. When you come and slash the mural and damage, it looks, it's not gonna maintain well, in my perception of urban space. And this question about that, since we're now focusing on that, which we have, how is your square footage changing from the existing square footage in the images Belkis showed us? What is the area of outdoor terrace space currently? And what is the outdoor of servable terrace space in the proposal with the mural?
So, yeah, so in terms of the number, if you want to know, let me see.
I'm guessing it's double.
460.
So the existing interior gross, just the two building, is 7,068 square feet. And with the new addition, it will be total, three building combined will be 11,892.
And we can see graphically that you're a little bit more than doubling the outdoor serving area.
The outdoor, it really depends whether you call the rooftop outdoor or not.
No, sorry.
But- Oh, just
Belkis
that
is
part.
helping us see
Yes.
graphically. So basically, my question, if I wasn't clear, was how much are you adding service space in the area where the mural is? And we can see.
It is double, it is double. 590.
So that's the major, and then you're adding the trees within that service area. So that's the major architectural change, functional change, or, context
Yeah.
change that you're presenting to us and asking for.
Yes.
And Tim, to answer, yeah, I mean, just not to be argumentative on the mural, this is personal experience. What we have found in the properties we operate, that there is a respect for our bare walls. If that's a bare concrete wall,
True.
that would be very, bad people tend to respect art, I don't know. But it tends to be, if you have something there, there's a lot less likely to damage, personal art on there. And so definitely if there was no mural, it would change my opinion. And, they're, done right and protected. I mean, it usually is better long term, what we've seen.
Thank you.
Well, I don't want to,
Yeah.
take too long, but I mean, the last thing I want to say, and I try to say that in a respectful way every time when I go in front of a review board, and I try to do, obviously, every time when there's a review board, I mean, obviously, some of you know me, you know how passionate I am of what I do, and sometimes it can become too, confrontational argument. But I would say this, there's a design review that that has people like you, that has expertise in design or different areas. And all of you are very passionate about our community. That's why you're doing this. And so obviously there will be personal opinions and preferences on what you say to any proposal in front of you. At the same time, there are something called what is required and what is not required. What we require is to get a certificate of appropriateness, obviously, from you guys at the end of this process. And, you know, and that has impact of what a private property owner can or cannot do and how long it's gonna take for them to do those things. Obviously, it has a real world impact on those things. And I just don't want to get lost to that, you know, and I'm not saying that you guys it's not aware of your, you know, the impact, what you are doing and what you're saying to us, and whether you find something acceptable or it's not the best, is acceptable or is not required or not. So, you know, I just want to make it clear that this is not just a design exercise. It's a real thing of that. You know that already, but you know, but sometimes I go to some review board, they don't understand that and they just, you know, go on about this.
Yes, I
So,
think.
If I can
I don't think we need to be lectured on what
what our job is.
so I would stop there.
If I can add one last comment, well, first of all, I'm Eliza, I'm Tim's wife. We have been designing for more than 13 years for a lot of community projects or residential or, commercial projects in town now. I'm so honored that Tim is known for his design. What I would like to make a small request, from the commissioner is that next time when we come back, what we would, do a better presentation, it is really to give you the background of this whole neighborhood, the 13th Avenue. So, my friend and client, he has, been investing in this specific street, 13th Avenue, since 2010. And for over the last 13 years, that's doing 2010, right? 2010. So, yeah, he has been, buying the Midway building and the effluent tank. Over the years, for the last 13 years, he invested over than $2 million of his own money in improving, the neighborhood. So, and actually in our narrative, if you actually spend a little time to read the narrative, it kind of like trace out, over the last 13 years, what are the improvements, not only visually, but also the safety of the neighborhood. Yeah, 2010, I was here, as a grad student. I know how bad it is, trash all around, it was a crack house, in the effluent tank building. So, I think we can all bring that perspective to see this whole neighborhood for a more like a continuity. Our client is really trying to make improvement to this specific neighborhood, and he continued to do so. It's really because of his passion, not because like he can just make more money. And now this year, my daughter is actually a freshman, not at OSU, but in Indiana University. I truly appreciate that there are entertainment spaces that actually put the safety of the student as their first priority. And also a lot of the employees, they are the OSU students. They have been benefited from effluent tank and Midway over the years. And, we can find those students to, show the support. A lot of times, as parents, we bring a very different, perspective to see these student spaces, but we have never, set foot inside. Let alone, just to get an idea of what they do, So we actually kind of lay it out in our narrative to show what kind of student, bodies that they support, that they help to, bring a lot of the events to offer them, mentorship, to those students. So I hope we
Eliza,
just try
I
to.
appreciate what you're saying. I would caution you, in these afternoons, we have a lot of other projects to look
Yeah.
at, and so I would caution you in your next presentation, not to front load the presentation,
Yeah.
but to try to stay within the guidelines. So we have a set of guidelines we operate based on,
Yeah.
and we try to work around everybody's passions and greater goals to work within what's the appropriate thing to do. So by making a tighter but clearer presentation, beginning with all of the things you want us to take into consideration, all the changes you're making, I think we'll have a more productive conversation more quickly and be able to give you more concrete feedback on the design. So we look forward to seeing you then.
So did
Thank
you get this
We need to move
presentation
on to
ahead
the
of
next
time?
project.
Did you get this presentation ahead of time?
Yes.
Okay.
And
Thank you all.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bob. Okay.
Then not. They want twice as much as the system.
Yes.
You ready, Chair?
Yeah, moving on to, where are we? UID 2308-011.
Yes, so this is for 8296 and 102 to 104 East 16th Avenue. And for this, the applicant is seeking a conceptual review for the construction of a new residential building. The proposal includes the demolition of several potentially contributing buildings on the site, construction of a new six-story residential building with amenity spaces, terraces, stoops, tall first-floor glazing, street trees, and parking on a portion of the first two levels. The new curb cut is proposed for East 16th Avenue, and the submission includes photos, conceptual floor plans, site plans, sections, and elevations. And looking at those, here you have the site plan scheme, showing the landscaping and the interior programming. Another first floor plan. And here you have the garage floor with the section, second floor and third and fourth floors. And then the fifth and the sixth floors. And then here, this is just a simple sort of street elevation, but you can see the proposed conceptual view of that. And so after review, the proposal is somewhat consistent with the University District Plan. The recommended land use is institutional. The plan provides guidance on adaptively reusing institutional sites, stating that new construction would be generally compatible with the existing neighborhood fabric, noting that higher densities may be appropriate for larger sites, provided the proposal provides usable open space, adequate parking, and addresses other plan design guidelines. Staff notes that these properties are generally surrounded by parcels recommended for higher intensity residential use. A higher intensity residential development on the site could potentially be supportable if the proposal is consistent with plan recommendations. The plan recommends that new construction be compatible with surrounding neighborhood in terms of size and scale, and the revised proposal is not consistent with this recommendation. However, staff recognizes the transitional nature of the site and the proximity to other high and medium density residential, as well as the planned hotel development across the street. Staff could support 6 stories closer to the center, but recommends the applicant step the building down to 4 stories on the eastern edge to more seamlessly transition into the neighborhood. The plan also recommends the preservation of contributing structures. The buildings on the site are potentially contributing. The applicant is encouraged to preserve the duplex at 102 to 104 16th in kind, and if preserved, staff could support 6 stories across the site. Staff could potentially support the demolition of the church building if the proposal exhibits a high level of site and building design, utilizes quality materials, and is compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. The University District Plan also recommends open space preservation be a primary consideration for redevelopment proposals to conserve as much open space and mature trees on the site as possible, and that multifamily buildings include stoops, porches, balconies, or other features to ensure they contribute to the street. The revised proposal is generally consistent with these guidelines, but staff encourages the applicant to place the lobby at the corner to serve as a clear main entrance and highlight the salvage architectural features. Finally, staff recommends the applicant take the University District Plan recommendations regarding building and site design, materials, lighting, landscaping, and parking into consideration as the design continues to develop. And the applicant should be mindful of the applicable land use category standards and engage with the Department of Building and Zoning Services to identify any needed variances. Thank you.
Thank you very much. No, because I'm trying to remember, it's been a while. We've got someone from the community that would like to speak.
Yes.
Do we do that before we speak to the applicant or after? I think we do it before. Do we?
Yeah, before. I believe we have one.
Yes.
Yes, just listening.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you all would like to be sworn in, I assume you're all going to speak tonight. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you very much. Would you like to add anything to the city's comments regarding this project?
Yes,
Go right ahead.
and we do have supplemental information as well.
Certainly.
We did email this, so I'm not sure if you got it or not. I do have it.
Directly to Stephanie.
Dave, would you-
I forwarded it to you, Marcus, but it was late in the day.
Was it late? It's probably in
You were probably setting up,
Yeah, I mean, I do have it, but I also have hard copies.
Copies works.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should go ahead and pass.
I mean, if you just know.
That way if I can have a copy as well. Thank you. Sure. I just haven't seen it, so I like to know what it's being discussed.
I understand. There is some redundancy.
Jim and I can share.
Oh, okay, good, yeah.
And then you got some. So there is a little bit of redundancy in terms of the material that was submitted previous to this meeting and what is in there in the package that we just handed out to you today. So that being said, if it's okay, I'd like to kind of move forward. Okay, can you go to the opening page? Not the cover page, but the second page, I'm sorry, this one here. Yeah, that one there. So this will be our third meeting on this project. We met once with the UAC. And we were here one time previous with this body, this board and commission. Susan's in the background here. We've obviously been in conversation with her ongoing in the landmarks group. So I think that's maybe watching them in the station or listening here today. But over the course of the various different meetings, we've heard several different comments and obviously the green space is one of them. The experience at the streetscape was one of them. The size and scale of the building was also one of the topics. So if we just kind of focus on maybe those three things, because those are the three things that we really address the most in our current building design. And so this particular exhibit, the plan to the right is our revised plan. The plan to the left is the existing building footprint of the church that's on site today. If you can maybe scroll down a little bit, because there's some data there at the bottom. Yeah, there you go. So what we did was an open space calculation. So we looked at the existing building as it is today, and you can read the numbers down there below. But on the left side, between the existing building and the existing pavement as an impervious material is 69%. In our building as proposed, which doesn't have any surface parking because the parking structure is actually at 67%. So one of the things that we really wanted to do was compress the building. You know, one of the consistent things that we heard at the various different conversation, too much, too big, so on and so forth. So we turned around and we said, okay, how can we shrink the footprint of this building? So the first thing we did was we looked at the parking. You know, we have to have parking, that's a given. We previously had a double loaded parking. We had 2 bays of parking. So that basically stretched the footprint of the building out, which forced all of the residential spaces closer to the streetscape, whether it be the 16 side or the Waldeck side. It forced the building towards the street. So what we did is we went back and said, okay, what can we do to this parking? So we basically took it to a single bay of parking, double stacked, that are non-communicating. So you don't have to worry about a ramp that takes up space, because we actually did first start looking at a 1 bay with a speed ramp scenario, but the speed ramp still adds 30 feet as half a bay. You know, so it really didn't gain us everything that we wanted to gain in terms of preserving the green space out along the street. So we went to just a single bay of parking, double stacked. 1 entry is on the Waldeck side, 1 entry is on the eastern side off of 16. So what that did for us was it freed up more space in front of the building that we're able to get all of the ground floor uses that we need to have on there, the lobbies, the cafe, all the student activity type things that are fairly typical. And we were able to preserve pretty much all of the green space as it exists today. And we felt that was a major component of first listening to what, you know, the University Area Commission and everybody here on the board had to say about the project. And we feel that the solution that we've come up with here definitely addresses that. And you really just have to look at the numbers in terms of what was the green space and what is the green space, and you can see that it's pretty much the same. You know, it's marginally different. Marginally more, true, yeah. But you know, but anyway, so if you can go to the next page and yeah. Flip back to the prior slide, please. I'm Steve Buss, the managing partner at campus. You know, so in the new plan, sorry, this doesn't get out of the screen.
you can see that we've got about 70 feet from the curb to the face of the building. And in the existing condition, that's about the same to the one corner, the pavement on the building kind of butts out there. And then, with the preservation of those three large mature trees, along 16th and Waldeck, then at the other courtyard where you see the cafe, the big indent, I think that's about another 60 feet from, 60 feet in that area from the face of the building to the face of the proposed building with the curb, which is more than the existing building off of 16th. So I think we've really made a lot of inroads, getting a lot of fenestration and getting the patios and the engagement at the street there up on 16th and all that.
Is there any chance that you can pull up that email that we sent over today? Not right this second, but there is some information in there that's very critical to this conversation. And I think would be helpful to have it on the big screen.
Got it.
Okay.
What page was that?
Well, I just want to keep going through this one, but at a certain point, the original, at a certain point, I would like to flip over.
You have it up.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So again, the goal was to retain green space, and those trees are the existing monumental trees that are on the street there today, and we felt that was important to retain as well. So we can go to the next sheet. This is the footprint, if you recall, and I don't think Carrie was here at the first meeting. But one of the things we tried to do with the exterior elevation as it addresses the street was to break the facade down so that it has somewhat of a rhythm to it. So just looking from right to left, on the east side, right to left, that facade is roughly 65 feet, which is translated to the residential units above. Then we have that big space in the middle that addresses the existing tree condition. That is also interior wise, that uses a common area space for the students. And then above, which you'll see on the next couple of plans here, that's the actual amenity space that's open to the south on the upper level deck. So then continuing around counterclockwise here, we do have that entry in that piece just to the right of the hand there, right there. That is the entry piece. And then I heard the comment about possibly addressing the entry to the corner. This site really doesn't have a corner. It has a predominant axis, if you will. But we, again, we're trying to, with that elevation, instead of having a flat facade, we're trying to break it down into parts that are more orientated to the street scale of the residential in the area. So again, that to the right is 65, 66 feet. That entry piece is about the same dimension. And then as you go around to the corner piece, the piece in the middle there to the left, that's kind of an inset piece. Yeah. So it's really 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different segments as you walk around the building from east to west of Waldeck and to the north. And again, the whole idea with that is to break that down to scale. So the elevation that we have in this plan is the original concept that we talked about last time. That is still true to what we're trying to accomplish here by bringing the lower 2 floors out a little bit, or however you want to look at it, setting the upper floors back a little bit and introducing that 2-story element, which in round numbers, 30 feet, 35 feet, somewhere in that ballpark, which again is consistent with some of the characteristics that you see within the neighborhood. And then also on the upper floor, we have a second step back as well, again, to try to create some additional relief in the building. So when you look at the plan, there's an awful lot of relief just by the way that the footprints work out. And then as you look at the building in elevation conceptually, we're also stepping it back and making different offsets in the building as well. So the plan to the left is the first level of residential. And so there you still see the trees and still see the footprint of the building and the amenity space. The original design had the courtyard completely internalized. It was that Texas donut that we were talking about at that time. So part of the move of changing the parking structure changed the amenity deck as well. That was a byproduct of that design change. But what it did for us is it gave us the ability to pull that amenity deck to the south and open that up and create a much more inviting space for the residences and also give it a lot more daylight into that area. So our original intent really provided a couple different rewards for us. One was the streetscape and the green space and preserving that. opening up the courtyard space to make it more attractive to the residents, but also still trying to keep to our original concept by breaking the building down in scale, both in plan but also in elevation. And then the plan to the right is more of a typical residential floor, which would be 3, 4, and 5. And here, just from a process, because I know there was a handful of architects on board, planners, we got the footprint to the point where it was comfortable. So we basically drew the footprint of the building first. And then Stephen and his firm, they do work all over the country. So they've got a huge library of units. So we basically borrowed his toolkit and took the unit plans out that were, well, Steve directed us in a large case, but we basically took their unit plans and composed this building footprint based upon an outline of the building itself. So we kind of developed the outside and then developed the inside, which is a little bit backwards, but we felt that was the appropriate way to approach this, knowing that we wanted to preserve as much of the site as we could. So then going to the next plan, this is the upper level plan. It's virtually the same other than the 3 nodes, which would be the eastern or right one, the middle one, and then that leftward one up on the wall deck is where the setbacks, and actually the corner piece as well, right there. You can see how there's 4 different setbacks in the building elevation on that top floor. So those were really critical moves to us that we thought was very important to address the various different comments that we've got from a lot of different people. And I think I'd like to believe that, if you just look at the numbers there, that the challenge that we were faced with was how do we reduce the footprint of the building, retain the streetscape, and retain the green space, yet get the kind of development that the economics need to have for the project. So
Also, just a couple other numbers as well. Can you remind us what your zoning variance request is?
well, zoning requires, Dave, help me out here, but there was a height issue, there was a parking issue, there was a bar ratio.
Can you give us the specifics of what is the current zone height requirement and what kind of zoning variance are you asking?
Well, the existing is 35 feet.
This is 35, yeah, this is in the recommendation for 60, I believe. I'd have to double check that.
So you want to go from, you want a zoning variance that will get you to 60 feet where it's currently at 35 feet height.
The district, I think that almost all the.
Ryan has to leave towards 35, so I think if we want to hear his opinion, let's go by him.
Yeah, both sides of the idea, I thought we.
Yeah.
Actively paid it.
Yes, Kay, I would say, I mean, this, where John and Stephen are trying to get this to a project that is acceptable to the board, and the zoning variances, I've not prepared specific zoning variances, but they will reflect whatever the plan is that's going forward.
Let's hear what Ryan has to.
There is another slide I would like to, but feel free if you have comments on.
I generally think you're taking steps in the right direction. You listened on the open space. I think you listened a little bit on the parking. I still have concerns. I looked at your parking chart you put in here. The other one that's lowest, I think you had on here was 12, the East 9th project, which isn't approved, hasn't even been before us. I think if that's the one you're referring to, I'm not sure which one you're referring to on that one. Is but on the back page, it's a different one. It just says 9th and high.
I think these were all ones that were approved, not any that are pending, but I'll check that.
9th and high.
I think it's the southern half of 9th. So, yeah, this one you did. We're working on the north half of that block, so it's really, it goes down to 8th. It's between 8th and 9th.
The one we've seen.
Well, I don't think that's, but either, I still struggle a little bit, and everyone at the board has a different opinion of parking but there's a lot of 6-bedroom plan in there, and that's how you're getting to a lot of density and whether 6 bedrooms are, and how many of those people are actually gonna have cars. I still think that 26% is very low, compared to everything else that you look at that's been approved when you look at those. There was nothing below 40% really than the 9th and high, which is that one I'm less familiar with. All the other ones I am. I still think there are some issues on density a little bit there. I understand the challenge you're up against of you have to make the numbers work, trying to get a certain amount of beds, you're trying to get parking. That's a challenge that, only you guys will know. I think for me is an improvement over what's there. I'm not saying we're all there, it's hand sketches, it's hard to understand some of that. I do think you're listening. I probably still have a little issue on the height, which leads into density, which leads into the parking based on a lot of the university plan that was put out there. But I'm also realistic in that there are give and take on that. But I do think this is a step in the right direction, but we're not there.
Could flip the one from prior slides, the MA did a massing study, just, obviously we've got the,
What's in that other package?
yeah, here it is.
Yeah.
So then they did a massing study, just to look at kind of the transition, and obviously, you have to focus on up and down High Street, extending all the way from Lane and all the way down to Short North. And obviously then behind it, you've got Pearl, and then the plan for a 12-story hotel. And then behind that, a 6-story planned garage, then wrapped by whatever. And obviously the uses in the neighborhood are mostly, student oriented, some form of student or institutional centering around the university. So I think this, the 2D that Emmy did was great, but I think the massing also then demonstrates how this really starts to get articulated in 3D or in a bird's eye view. How those wings of the building wrap around those mature trees. To break up that streetscape, but then, the 2D also can't really communicate how that, the patios and step backs from 2 to 3, 4, 5, and then, up at level 6, steps back even further, to react.
Probably knows they've been there. I mean, there was a lot in understanding the plan and how this, I went to Ohio State, been around for many years and understand that traditions and the give and take of where height is and where density is. And, this is still much larger. I would love to see this as compared to the Scholar building compared to, it is much larger. We want to compare to the hotel that's there, but that was a unique thing as part of the plan, as the marquee, as the center point. So it's hard to compare to a 7 or a 12-story hotel and say, well, just this far, that height is, only, it's what, 7 stories, or we're saying 5 stories less than that comparison is not as easy to make. I'm not saying, and I said this in the last, I'm very pragmatic. I'm not here saying 35 feet is the absolute limit, but I just think as we continue to study this, to kind of think about that.
There is if we can go to.
Share with you the images. She was.
Yeah, I have. That's right.
If you could, I think it's back a page or two off of this presentation, because I want to kind of build.
Presentation, sorry. This one?
No, the supplemental information.
Yes, I'm there. I went back 2 pages.
We'll go back. There's a land use map we put in there.
It's supposed to be. Yeah,
that one.
I mean, can I make one point? You're showing a massing that has not been approved. This has not been approved.
I understand.
So.
Yeah. We're only going by what information we have available. My understanding is that's.
I just want to be clear so that everybody understands that this is not actually.
Understand.
You'd have to get staff to research. I think I had to recuse myself, but I thought Keith Myers came in and got approval for those heights. He didn't get approval for a specific design.
I don't think it's been approved of zoning at USC.
This was years ago. This is
Since we met in that room right there.
It might have been.
I was at the meeting.
It was before
and that was all the High Street.
It was before the 15th and High stuff.
Okay.
So I seem to recall what happened is Campus Partners went to the board and got approval on heights for those sites. And they thought
to the board of trustees or to the design review board?
UIDRB. And I think they got approval on either 10 or 12 at the hotel as a generic thing for the site, but no design ever was approved.
Right.
Nor frankly has ever any design materialized.
Right.
I was one of the teams to pursue the hotel like pre-pandemic.
Right.
They awarded to someone and it never went anywhere.
Right.
So
Right.
Hypothetically, it could happen, but it's not currently happening.
And I think what's valuable to the context of this conversation is that this isn't a particularly fruitful graphic or piece of information upon which we should be basing this decision. You have lots of other great
Well,
information.
I mean, I guess I
I just want to point out
of the accuracy of that, because like, if you look at the gray rectangle, 12-story hotel, it's twice the height of the office buildings in front, which are 6 stories, but the floor to floor of the hotel is not the same as an office building, as you know. And it is much closer to the floor to floor of an apartment building.
Yeah,
So
that's actually scaled out at 132 feet.
yeah, so I mean, this I think is high, 12 stories compared to this 6. You're 6, this should be double the you. You look a little low. And a 6-story parking garage doesn't have the same height as residential because it's flat slab, it's just cars. So I mean, I agree.
Precast is 11 and a half foot of floor.
Depends, you can do a lot of post tension flat plate. Yeah, it's gonna depend on the particular system for sure.
Okay.
But Katie's point holds that this graphic isn't helping you as much as you think it is. Several of us are architects, one is a developer.
2, 3.
I know Brian's gonna be leaving soon, so I just wanna make sure, did you say everything you wanted to say, Ryan?
Yeah, no, and I just,
Okay.
the plan is very, it's a height that's given there, I believe it's like 110 or what, like.
Yeah.
There's a whole plan that we put in there, it's not stories, it's not left up, I mean, it's the same way that the height district here, it doesn't care how many stories you can build, one, you can build it in, you can build 7-foot stories if you want, right?
Keep it on that
They look at that plan and then that will actually represent what height can go there.
There's 2 things we're just addressing. One is kind of the height and intensity through that massing diagram, and then this is looking at the use, okay? So this is use, just illustrating that you generally have students occupying everything out to a third, more or less.
So I think Brian put it well, and I'm pretty much on board with him. The one place I would defer is maybe the percentage of parking spaces, although I get your take on it. I think
And I was never saying 40 is it, I still think to it, but all things are considered, I think you can find a common ground.
Right.
I think you're moving in the right direction. I think you've listened to everything everyone said. We're trying to put in the open space and to walk a fine line between the density involved to make your pro forma work and to get past the stories. But I'm with Ryan, I don't think it's quite there. It's still a little much bulk for the site. Honestly, I thought staff's recommendations seemed pretty spot on. Leave the existing house in place and maybe 6 stories across the site is defendable. Or if you feel like they have to demo the house, but drop it to 4 on the backside of the site. That's right. To me, it seemed like an eminently reasonable path forward. Yeah, but I think Brian said it well. I'm in complete agreement.
I could lend a little bit of clarity to the discussion because I provided some photographs. There are a few issues that I have with the graphics print. First of all, they presented site plans at different scale. And they want to use data to argue the green space. And I would like to call up some images. They're showing 3 trees on the site. There are actually 8 trees on the site. So just so we're clear what trees are being removed. So the side from Waldeck now looks like this. And if you look across the street from Waldeck, I don't have that image, but across the street from Waldeck, you have a series of 3 residential structures that are the scale of what you know as the other residential structures. And as you go around the corner, there are a series of 3 of these sycamore trees. They're referring to mature trees, the ones that they've shown that they're maintaining. There's a blue spruce that's a very mature old tree that they're removing, and then a series of 3 additional sycamores that are healthy, strong trees. I would argue that they all make the quality of the green space, not only the area that you're calculating brown grass, but the quality of the green space that's there is significant. You also have the sloping grass that goes up to the building at its current setback. If you look at that as a contributing green space to the neighborhood and contrast it with what you're showing us with massing that's broken up into 6 stories and to smaller volumes of space that basically sit around the trees, I would argue that what you're offering is not at all comparable, even though you're using data to try to argue this. Just my opinion.
Well, I think it is comparable because, that big tree that's right there, just to the right of the screen there, you can't obviously do too much around that, so this.
You can't do anything around it.
So that's going from the fire.
The slope would remain, because you can't mess around with the roots of the tree or you would kill the tree. So
And
that's,
yet you are, and yet you're building a
No.
foundation,
no,
right?
yeah, outside of,
For a six-story building.
outside of the critical footprint of the tree itself.
That's an 80-foot, that's an 80-foot span from building face to building face outside of that tree. So we, basically avoid the critical root zone. We've also, in this iteration, going from, the original plan, we had 8 levels, went to 7 levels. Now we're at 6 levels at 88 units with this. And what it's done is we've eliminated the basement. So what happens with, and you can see MA's kind of been working with the grading just to kind of set the grades at the lobby, at the cafe, at the entrances, so that those grades are meeting that slope of this building. So the green slopes go up, so we're not cutting down. And then we're, around the one largest tree, for instance, that slope will continue up into the building. So we're not cutting down into that, we're not cutting down to create a basement into that critical root zone. We're significantly behind it.
Before you go on though, it looks to me like the lawn is sloping up. So if you're maintaining the existing tree,
That's right.
and you're indicating that your finished floor is not totally dissimilar from the curb, then you're cutting that hillside up.
At the entry piece.
We're beyond it. So we're at 761. We're at 761 on the cafe. I mean, we don't necessarily want to get in a grading conversation, but we're close enough where I think the grading that we're showing, preserves the green slopes.
Which is the intent.
So outside the cafe city lounge, you're good, that's depressed then. You're showing it this.
You go from about 760 at the curb line up to 763 at the north.
And then back down to 761.
Yeah, I mean, not that we can't raise that 761, but
Yeah.
You've got the first floor, we're showing the 16-foot floor to floor. So there's some massaging that can be done. But what we got can and would work.
So the city is suggesting that you knock this thing down at the edges, correct? That the comment? The building come down in scale.
Oh, so yes, if the duplex is demolished, then we would recommend that there be step backs at either
Extremity of the building.
Yeah, to step it down into the neighborhood. If the duplex is kept and preserved, then then we could potentially support 6 stories across the board, but you're keeping that duplex for the transition.
Can you then show the image of this number
The-
3 duplex?
Yes.
What I'd say is that the demolishing the duplex kind of enables preservation of that tree.
So what
That
I
way of the building.
talk about here is that by demolishing the 3rd duplex, you're removing a contributing structure. So what you have in this neighborhood is a historic school built in 1909 by David Riebel, that's now the Gem School. These 3 duplex buildings, and then currently there's a space between that area, which is the way parking goes in now, and the way parking wraps around and isolates the modern church from the other 19th century, early 19th century structures. What you're showing here, what is the distance that you'll now have a 6-story elevation setback from the second of the 3 buildings?
It's 10 feet.
Right, so you're now gonna have a 6-story facade 10 feet away from the remaining 2 duplexes. So you see where that's showing up right here? I think that's not-
It's large.
I think that's not-
15, and then it increases to 18 plus 5, 23 feet. So, I think that's where staff is recommending a bulk massing step down at that.
That's not what you've drawn.
Well, correct, it's not what we've drawn, but we drew a 6-story building. So is it the height or is it the?
It's both. It's the proximity. When I look at the drawing that you've given us here to understand green space and site coverage, I'm seeing this facade of the 4th of your 6-story massings. That's going to be this dimension away from the 2nd building. So what I see in the photograph is 3 contributing duplex structures. Take away the one that's near the pass-through at this point and put a 6-story facade there 10 feet away from the other 2 duplexes.
The existing, well, it'd be more than 10 feet because that other house.
I'm just going by
side
the
yard
graphic.
setback. Well, but the other house has a side yard setback as well.
The existing duplexes are about 4 feet apart, so we would be removing a 2-story structure with a gabled roof that's about 4 feet away from the middle duplex. And under staff's recommendation would be with, we'd be about 15 feet away with a 4-story component. A 4-story component as opposed to a 2, I mean, it's effectively 3 stories with that, three stories with the attic.
And if you go back to the site plan.
Six stories is a balcony.
Because one of the things that we did.
What is the dimension of the setback? So when you showed where it goes from the lower level up to 6 stories.
That's what I was wanting to show right here.
Yeah.
Because we align the faces of the buildings. So the face of the existing porches on the residential buildings aligns with the 2-story element of the proposed building. And then it steps back. So it very much resembles what the houses look like in terms of the front.
So on your 5th and 6th floor plan, I read that alignment, right, that aligns with the facade of a 2.5-story duplex building. So there will be a 6-story mass 15 feet away from 2 contributing duplexes. And to clarify this, instead of us trying to imagine it, I would recommend that when you come back, you show those detailed studies. So you show a more developed facade image of the easternmost part of your building in the context. Does that make sense to you? I think that'll help.
I mean, just imagine a profile along the street, and it's like, okay, if you're driving along the street or walking on the sidewalk, that's what this is gonna look like.
Like a street elevation.
Yeah, I think we
The
could,
full context of.
Profile.
yeah, I think we can, into this south elevation, I think we can add the duplexes and then show that, we'll get this dialed in so it's more graphically accurate.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time on the plan, quite honestly.
On that part,
Okay, then let's talk about the plan that you spent so much time on, because I don't see stairwells where they need to be in a good housing plan. You've got a stairwell in the middle of the easternmost block so that you've got your means of egress to be covered. I'm on page 6 with the 5th and 6th floor plan. So I'd like to have a discussion with my architecture colleagues about where the stairs and the elevators are located relative to the corridor system for the building. When somebody goes down the 5-foot wide corridor, they have to make 2 right angles to get to a means of egress.
Yeah, it meets code.
It's code.
It's ugly
Well,
and it's uncomfortable
that's your opinion.
and it's not a good design.
Yeah.
was that the purview? Is it?
Comments fitted to what we see from the right of way. But
Oh, okay.
if
We
the-
can't talk about the plan inside.
Not inside, no, but
Okay.
if the inside circulation relates.
That's fair,
to
because that's really a
comments
market
visible
issue
from
for
the
you
right
guys,
of
or
way.
not.
If
Not
we
my
But good food for thought.
If we could go back to that landing spot, because I think there's a point there that's important. Because the reason we did that 3D model was in part because of this. Everything that is green is a green residential building. And typically, the Greek residential buildings are bigger, they have more mass, and they are high density housing. And so if you just look at all the green that's around this particular site, it's really all green. And then to the south, it's going to be what is presumed to be a 6-story parking structure. So the massing and density of the building isn't really all that far off from what else is around it. And so that's really what kind of led us to do that 3D massing model. I understand, we're doing a 3D model in a Google image, there's always a little bit of scale adjustment there. But the point about that is that when you look at from basically 16th down to just south of 15th, so call it a 2-block area, and then a block and a half back, which would be about to our site, where Waldeck splits off or 16 goes off. Those 2-block areas are high density blocks. That's 15th and High. 15th and High was intentionally, and I'm not going to speak for you guys because you know it a lot better than I do, but it was intentionally retained as a node for the university and for High Street in general. So nodes are generally areas of higher density and higher concentration of activities. whatever those activities might be. It could be residential, could be parking, commercial. Obviously at 15 there's a bunch of office space there as well. So this whole 2 block area is very much a mixed use community. I understand clearly that it abuts to and is adjacent to residential, but that green residential is all high density housing. And so I think that's an important part that we recognize.
I get that, but here's how I look at it. I'm imagining a big sphere on top of this, and 1/4 of the sphere is facing something that's of equal density, and then the 3/4 of the circle around it is not that character at all. So yeah, if you're looking southwest from the corner, yeah, you're looking potentially at some future deck that's not been submitted yet, and then a hotel which has not been submitted yet. But everything else around it is not of that scale at all.
Well, you go to it was just that the Phi Delta house.
Yeah.
That's to the north.
You
of
go
the
back
site.
to that.
So I think
It's set way back from the streets. You have an enormous green lawn with mature trees and elements with architectural detailing and pitched roofs. So what you call high density housing, very true, it is high density housing, higher than it's supposed to be. Oftentimes you have more than the legal limit of residents inside, but they have pitched roofs, they have architectural qualities and features that give character to an overall area.
Sure.
You can work toward
Yeah.
design that, but you don't have that yet because you're early in the design process.
as far as the height though, I think that, what we're, looking at here on this side, and the comment about the duplex is understood, but we're, the proposed building finished floor starts lower than the existing summit, building is when you drive up, but then you've got the Fidel house, so you go up 15 something feet, and then you go up 4 levels with a gabled roof. So our top level won't be appreciably higher than that, but I think we need
Their
to,
third level is
develop.
pitched, so they have, the 4th level is pitched, so they have a massing that's consistent with other contributing structures in the neighborhood, as opposed to 6 stories, it goes up to a massing that honors that cornice and that volumetric height. The majority of buildings, by and large, off High Street, and I also dispute the argument that you're trying to make that 15th and High, which we supported as the Arts District, those buildings front onto High Street, where High Street is the area that's been determined to have the higher density and greater massing as a corridor through the city. What you're doing, which I dispute, is pulling that massing deep into the residential neighborhood, changing the fabric of the historic neighborhood for the benefit of this particular project. I'm concerned that then the next builder that comes along and says, oh, well, they got 6 stories this way, let's do the next one over, and pretty soon the whole neighborhood. You have adjacent to you a lot of other structures, the Evans Scholar House that's respecting the neighborhood, Dan's collective housing, but has maintained an architectural fabric that fits with the other kinds of sororities, fraternities, and independent residences. You have a purchase option for this, conditional with the zoning variance, is that right?
Correct.
And how long do you have to get that zoning variance before you purchase?
I need to check, but it's ongoing.
How is that relative?
Yeah.
Just want to know what
So
that, just in terms of timing and how
I
much
don't think-
longer it's going to take to get you to the place you need to be.
I mean, we can do it as long as they have the patience to do it, but I think
So there's no-
I don't think that's germane for the DRB's purview here. I think, we should, can add to and enhance on the elevations, south elevation, the east elevation, and do that. As far as the fabric discussion, we, understand you've got an existing functionally obsolete building. It's got some fantastic interior elements, and, we've met with Susan, we have detailing that has to be done to address that.
Functionally obsolete?
The building's functionally
It's
obsolete.
not. There are cultural
To the-
activities that could happen there.
The church
There are a lot of
doesn't-
things that could happen in that building.
Church.
It doesn't have to be a church.
Not to the.
Could be a school, could be a performance center, could be an arts center. It's not gonna work for housing, and that's what your interest is. But let's be
It's not
clear.
working for a church either, so
It's not working for a church, but it could be many other things.
And it
This
hasn't
architecture
worked.
has the integrity.
they've tried to use it for other
Clear
things.
that it's inappropriate to say that building is functionally obsolete.
It's
No.
functionally obsolete.
That's
for
not a true
the-
statement.
it's
Staff,
functionally
so I
obsolete.
think maybe here we could agree to disagree. And I'm just curious what if any other members have comments, Emma, Lori.
My turn, okay.
Oh, Tim, do you want to go first?
I don't think I can leave this discussion. I mean, and I want to acknowledge that you have addressed many points of concern. One point of concern that clearly you've chosen not to is the reduction of the most significant architectural element in terms of preservation into simply salvage relics, which you will use in out of context ways in this project. And I'm disappointed that we're essentially being asked to ignore that concern.
No,
Which to me is the preservation, yes, I agree about the duplexes. To me, the preservation issue here is the unique interior space, which we are simply being asked to, I suppose, somehow admit is too difficult to deal with.
No, I would politely disagree. I think we recognize the importance of what that space was created. It was at that point in time, it was basically an adaptive reuse project. Because they took an old gymnasium and adapted it into a much more creative assembly type space. So what we would be proposing and are proposing is that we would take all of those same unique elements and adaptively reuse them in our building.
Funny, in your own description,
I
you
know,
talk about space. And in fact, in your strategy, you're talking about individual relics, your term.
No,
let's hold on.
Tim, I think you, in our very first meeting with the UAC, somebody, I can't remember who it was, used the word salvage, and that was not a good word to use because that's not the purpose or intent of what we want to do. So if we can maybe not use that word anymore, because our intent is to preserve, restore, and adaptively reuse those elements within the building.
It's the term you used in the packet you gave us. It says salvage relic.
That was on the original thing. So let's, it's not semantics aside.
Semantics aside, there's an issue of.
This used to be the gymnasium. What we are proposing to do is to take things that were in a common area and a gathering area and put them and use them in a common and gathering area in the building, whether that be the lobby or whether it's the study area. The key elements, from when we walked through with Susan, and subject to, she hasn't spoken, so I don't, but are those windows, the undulating wood ceilings, and the handful of other key elements that we would, propose to reuse. We think they're great. I walked into that first meeting, I said, we're not like the orcs from the Lord of the Rings, I'm not here to go demolish something, but, and these are cool to do and to implement.
It's not particularly time to deal with definitions of preservation. But I also don't, and the reason I brought it up, because it is so absent from this discussion this afternoon. In terms of the input that you're giving, at least from me, I'm not satisfied with this approach addressing the call for preservation concerns. Just as a fair point in terms of giving you feedback this afternoon.
Yes, sir. Understand.
We need to wrap this up. We're over time and several of us have to go.
Yeah.
Can I address the parking? I think that was one other key issue. Would that be germane to be able to do here?
I'm just curious what the other members of the board have to say. Maybe we could quickly hear from Lori and Emma.
I'm pretty much, I really appreciate the fact that you've really looked at the greenscape, landscaping, and giving us a little bit more depth up to the building. I still think it's overbuilt for the site. I do agree that a street context imagery would help us understand really about how this building is addressing its neighbors to the north and to the east, sorry. And I also believe that, 4 stories, what works about the building that's behind is that it does have pitched roofs. Right now, we're looking at a building that most likely has flat roofs. So we're looking at a true a 6-story or 4-story if you go with staff's approval, which is much different than a 4-story gable building. So I think those are the things that we need to kind of look at for the next round to understand a bit more about the context of the project.
I would agree. Thank you.
Do you all feel like you have a good direction to go in for the next time around? Any other last questions?
As far as parking, I think one thing we see is generally when you're this close to key entrances or key nodes to university, we see students are, generally will self-select. So, we've done, a lot of other Big Ten schools, Illinois, Madison, Purdue, Indiana. And, we've seen those usage ratios come into this 20-something% range. I think obviously the parking, in America has an odd way of driving undesired outcomes. So I guess it would help to kind of, understand if the general configuration you're looking at gets there. I mean, we're in the 20-something% range, high, like 27% with this scenario. I think with some adjustment or reduction, looking at the east side and dropping that component down, I think that ratio will get up closer to 30. But I just want to kind of understand is there super heartburn on the parking, or what's the?
Parking ratio is not a biggie. It's, Ryan is a developer, and so his perspective is based on having units. I'm fine with your parking reaction. I think my concern is specifically bulk and height on the site. Parking.
Fair enough.
Agreed.
I agree.
We'll work on the elevations so that we've got better graphic, image of what, each side would look like from different perspectives. Go from there.
Okay, I just, very quickly, I think you've heard from several of us that your key challenge here is bulk and height, and I think staff gave you some clear recommendations on how to address it. So I just want to be clear, it's a tough site. You're going from a higher density neighborhood, lower density one. If you really want this to move forward, you got to address bulk and height. Like, I think enough of us have said it that we're sympathetic, and there's a way to get there, but you got to take it seriously.
Well, we have. I mean,
More. Not enough.
Is the group okay with?
We appreciate what you've done, but you got to do more.
Yeah. Is the group okay with 6 stories at, parts of this and then transitioning down?
Yes.
I would have to have more information as far as how it would look and how it would kind of reflect upon the surrounding neighborhood. So I can't say yes.
Conceptually, I agree. Conceptually, yes, but I need to see what it looks like in the context of everything around it.
I think the context is important.
Yes.
We'll add the context on the elevations and.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much.
yeah, thank you. Appreciate your time.
It's back.
If you guys could just throw a wide open.
I mean, we'll recycle.
I will remind her, but yeah.
It was a mistake.
Last thing
Staff-
is
staff-
just to have the staff rules into record. That's the last thing.
I need a recommendation. I can't have that.
Second. Second, Ms. Gonzalez? Yes. Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. Soto?
Yes.
Mr. Spindler? He's done. That passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you all. Are we adjourned?
Are we there?
Your turn.
Okay, thank you.